a rather silly but charming British comedy. Classic movies. By Judy Dungey. The Smallest Show on Earth, 1957. Stars Virginia McKenna, Bill Travers, Peter Sellers, Margaret Rutherford, and Bernard Miles. Featuring Leslie Phillips and Sid James. Directed by Basil Dearden.
With a cast like that, you'd think you were going to see one of the greatest shows on earth, but no. In fact, The Smallest Show on Earth is simply a rather silly but charming British comedy of the slightest kind. When Matt Spencer, played by Bill Travers, inherits his great-uncle Simon's entire fortune, he believes he and his new wife Jean, played by Virginia McKenna, will now be set for life. When they arrive in the thriving metropolis of Loughborough to claim their inheritance, they are thrilled to see the Grand Cinema as a very impressive edifice indeed, and are told by the taxi driver that it is the only cinema in town. To their dismay, however, when they arrive at the lawyer's office, they are informed that their inheritance is the now closed Bijou Theatre, otherwise known as the Flea Pit. The Bijou is quite a sorry sight, although in its heyday it may have been just as impressive as the Grand. Now, however, it is run down and shabby and right beside a railway line that rattles the old theatre's very foundations. The Bijou is staffed by a trio of elderly characters who have been with the cinema since the days of silent movies. Bookkeeper/ticket box lady and sometime paramour of Great Uncle Simon is Mrs. Fazakerly, played by Margaret Rutherford. Projectionist and part-time alcoholic is Mr. Quill, Peter Sellers, and the shy caretaker doorman is Old Joe, Bernard Miles. The new owners brighten when they hear that the owner of the Grand Cinema, a Mr. Hardcastle, had made an offer to Great Uncle Simon of £5,000 so he can knock down the Bijou and build a car park. That amount of money seems a fortune to the couple, but when they tell Hardcastle that they'll accept, he laughs uproariously. Television has changed the situation and the offer is now £500, which won't even cover the outstanding debts on the estate. With the help of their lawyer, Leslie Phillips, the Spencers decide to make a show of reopening the Bijou in competition with Hardcastle, but their plan backfires and they're left to run it for real. Against all odds, the fortunes of the old Flea Pit start to improve and they begin to make a small profit, especially when they hit on the idea of turning up the heat during a desert movie so the patrons think they're dying of thirst and pounce on the drinks at interval. Things get even better when Matt hires the gorgeous Marlene Hogg as drinks tray girl. She's much better able to deal with the customer harassment than poor Jean did, and their profits begin to soar. At this point, Hardcastle decides to step in and sabotage their efforts, leading to some of the more hilarious parts of the film, especially when Matt has to run the ageing projection equipment by himself. It all comes to a head when old Joe decides to take matters into his own hands, leaving the owners with a moral dilemma that they decide to solve with suitable inaction. Suffice to say, all's well that ends well. The Smallest Show on Earth was a bit of nonsense, but just wait until the three old-timers show you what they're made of in the scene where they treat themselves to a bit of reminiscing about the silent movie days. They didn't become internationally famous for nothing, you know. Virginia McKenna and Bill Travers were real-life newlyweds themselves that year and had only just returned to England from making The Barretts of Wimpole Street. Leslie Phillips also had a small part in that film. Virginia was on her way to being a big star, having starred the previous year in A Town Like Alice, and Bill Travers too had starred in Wee Geordie and was becoming widely known. As a couple, these two went on to make many movies together until their life-changing roles in Born Free, about conservationist George Adamson and the lioness Elsa. Conservation then became their life's work, although they continued to maintain their acting roles as a platform while they set up what ultimately became the Born Free Foundation. Bill died in 1994, but Virginia continues working occasionally and is patron of the Cinnamon Trust, which helps elderly people keep their pets. Their son Will Travers continues their work with the Born Free Foundation. Just goes to show where a charming little film can lead. But probably the most interesting feature of this film in 2026 is to look back at how a trip to the flicks was in that era. Even after television arrived, seeing a film in a flea pit cinema was still an event in itself, and entirely different to today. As the Radio Times said about this movie, in praise of flea pits everywhere, this charming comedy will bring back happy memories for anyone who pines for the days when going to the pictures meant something more than being conveyor belted in and out of a soulless multiplex. The smallest show on earth with the biggest heart. It's available on Plex.